The Andali Empire had stood for 3,000 years, a monument to stability in a chaotic galaxy. When Empress Talvina III died in her sleep at the age of 407, that stability shattered like crystal struck by a hammer. The problem was simple. She had named no heir. 4 noble houses, each with legitimate claims through bloodline or marriage or ancient treaty, stepped forward. Within a week, the Galactic Council received formal declarations from all 4 claimants. Within 2 weeks, the first shots were fired. The galaxy called it the Succession Wars, though historians would later argue it was really 4 separate conflicts happening simultaneously. House Korven controlled the military apparatus and struck first, claiming that strength determined legitimacy. House Melani held the support of the religious orders and the oldest bloodline, arguing for tradition. House Rykath commanded popular support among the common citizens and wanted to transform the empire into a democracy. And then there were the free captains, warlords and pirates who saw opportunity in the chaos and claimed they were fighting for a free Andali people, though everyone knew they fought only for themselves. Within a month, proxy wars erupted across 40 star systems. The Andali Empire controlled nearly 40% of the galaxy's major trade routes, and every species watched nervously as those routes became battlegrounds. In the Galactic Council chambers on Station Unity, Ambassador Marcus Reeves of Earth stood before the assembled representatives. He was a tall man, gray-haired and lean, with the kind of face that gave away nothing. He had served as humanity's chief diplomat for 12 years, and in that time he had become known for 2 things: his patience and his absolute refusal to be drawn into galactic politics. Earth recognizes the tragedy that has befallen the Andali people, Reeves said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. However, we will not be taking sides in this conflict. Humanity declares absolute neutrality in the Succession Wars. There was murmuring throughout the chamber. The Zelkan ambassador leaned forward. Ambassador Reeves, surely you understand the economic implications. The trade disruptions alone will be minimized by our neutrality, Reeves interrupted smoothly. Human space will remain open for refugee transit. Our merchants will continue trading with all factions equally. But we will not provide military support to any claimant, and we will not permit military vessels to transit through human-controlled systems. The Therian representative clicked her mandibles in what might have been amusement or disdain. How very human, to stand aside while others bleed. Reeves met her compound eyes without flinching. We prefer to think of it as not making a bad situation worse. The vote was recorded. Earth would remain neutral. Most of the other species chose sides within days, seeing opportunity to gain influence with whichever house eventually won. Only humanity stood apart. Back on Earth, in the subterranean chambers of the Human Defense Council, a very different conversation was taking place. 3 months into the war, General Thax Korven stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Unbreakable Will, and watched a world burn. The colony below had been loyal to House Melani. Korven had offered them one chance to surrender. When they refused, he had given the order for orbital bombardment. Not military targets, those would have been legitimate. No, Korven wanted to send a message. His fleet had targeted population centers. 40,000 Andali civilians died in the first hour. Korven was a pragmatist. He understood that wars were won through morale as much as firepower. If the other houses saw what happened to those who opposed Korven, they would think twice before resisting. It was brutal, yes, but efficient. That was how Korven thought in terms of efficiency. Broadcast the footage to all Andali worlds, he ordered. Let them see the price of defiance. His communications officer hesitated. General, the galactic laws regarding civilian casualties do not apply during civil wars, Korven finished. The Andali Empire is sovereign. What we do within our own borders is our business. Send the transmission. The footage went out across every channel. The galaxy watched in horror as cities became firestorms. The Galactic Council issued formal condemnations. Ambassador Reeves stood once more before the assembly and read a statement denouncing the attacks as violations of basic sentient rights. But Earth sent no ships. Earth took no action. Kira Ostan watched the footage from her small office in House Melani's intelligence division. She was young for her position, only 32 standard years, but she had a gift for patterns. Where others saw chaos, she saw connections. She watched General Korven's face as he announced the bombardment. She committed it to memory. Then she returned to her work, tracking enemy fleet movements and analyzing communication intercepts. 3 months later, she received a priority alert. General Thax Korven was dead. The report stated that the Unbreakable Will had suffered a catastrophic reactor failure during a routine hyperspace jump. The entire vessel and its crew of 4,000 had been lost. Preliminary investigations suggested improper maintenance of the reactor core. Kira read the report twice. Korven had been meticulous about ship operations. He inspected his flagship personally every week. The idea that he would allow shoddy maintenance was absurd, but reactor failures happened. Space was dangerous. She filed the report and moved on. 6 months into the war, a free captain's warlord named Zek the Render controlled a small empire of his own in the disputed border regions. Zek had made his fortune raiding refugee convoys, the desperate civilians fleeing the war zones. He took what he wanted, sold what had value, and killed the rest. His reputation was built on creative cruelty. He wanted people to fear him. Intelligence estimates suggested Zek had killed at least 3,000 refugees personally, and his crews had killed tens of thousands more. Then Zek's base went silent. When a House Rykath patrol finally investigated 2 weeks later, they found the station intact, power running, life support functional, and every single person aboard dead. The investigation report that reached Kira's desk was disturbing. The deaths looked like internal conflict, possibly poison introduced into the air system, but Zek's security was legendary. He trusted no one, had redundant systems, and his guards were fanatics. The idea that someone could have poisoned them all seemed impossible. More troubling, the station's security footage had been expertly wiped. Not destroyed, wiped. Someone with considerable technical skill had systematically deleted specific files while leaving the system operational. Kira added the report to her files and continued working. It was 3 weeks later, during a routine data analysis, that she noticed the pattern. She had been building a database of significant enemy casualties, tracking which of House Korven's commanders had been killed, which free captains had been eliminated, which obstacles to House Melani's victory had been removed. It was standard intelligence work, but when she plotted the deaths on a timeline, something caught her attention. 23 high-value targets had died in the past 6 months, all of them in accidents or internal conflicts. All of them were known for excessive brutality or war crimes, and none of the deaths could be definitively traced to any of the warring factions. Kira expanded her analysis. She plotted the locations of the deaths on a star chart. Every single incident had occurred within 3 jumps of a human trade route. She sat back in her chair, staring at the display. It had to be coincidence. Humans were everywhere. Their merchant vessels traveled throughout the galaxy. Their neutrality meant they were one of the few species still trading in war zones, but still. She began pulling records of human ship movements. Every vessel was accounted for. Merchant ships with full cargo manifests, passenger liners with complete crew lists, scientific expeditions with proper documentation. Nothing suspicious. She was about to abandon the line of inquiry when she decided to check one more thing: human immigration records. Breaking into Earth's civilian databases was very illegal, and if she was caught, it would cause a diplomatic incident. But Kira had not risen to her position by being timid. She activated her best intrusion software and went hunting. What she found made her blood run cold. Hundreds of humans had traveled through Andali space in the past 6 months. That by itself was unremarkable. Humans traveled everywhere. But when she cross-referenced their names with publicly available military service records, a pattern emerged. Nearly all of them were ex-military. Not just military, special operations. Earth's equivalents of deep strike commandos, intelligence operatives, sabotage specialists, and they were all listed as being on personal leave or vacation. Kira pulled up one file at random. Former Lieutenant James Park, served in human special operations for 12 years, decorated for valor in 3 separate conflicts, retired from active service 2 years ago but remained in the reserves. His travel itinerary showed him taking a leisure cruise through the Andali border region 6 months ago. Kira checked the dates and locations. Lieutenant Park had been in the same system as Zek the Render's base. 3 days before everyone aboard died. She checked another name, former Captain Angela Torres, combat engineer with expertise in reactor systems, had taken a cultural exchange trip to Andali space 4 months ago. Torres had been in the same sector as the Unbreakable Will. 1 week before it exploded, Kira checked 20 more names at random. Every single one had been near at least one accident or incident that had eliminated a known war criminal. She sat in her office for 3 hours, staring at the data before she finally accepted what it meant. Humanity was interfering in the war. Not officially. There were no human warships, no formal military operations. But individual humans, highly trained and extremely dangerous humans, were traveling through Andali space and systematically eliminating the worst actors in the conflict. And they were doing it in a way that left no evidence. Kira compiled her findings into a report and requested an immediate meeting with her superior, Lord Davrin Rykath. Davrin had started the war leading his own faction but had surrendered to House Melani 3 months ago when it became clear that Lady Saris Melani would eventually win. Now he served as one of Saris's senior advisors. Davrin read the report in silence. He was an older Andali, his scales faded to pale blue with age, but his eyes were sharp. "This is quite an accusation, Officer Ostan. I have the data to support it, my lord. You hacked Earth's immigration databases." "Yes, my lord." He was quiet for a long moment. "If you're right, this represents a serious violation of their stated neutrality, or a very clever interpretation of it." Davrin looked up at her. "Explain." "Earth never deployed military forces. They never authorized operations. These are civilians on vacation, legally traveling through open space. If those civilians happen to be ex-military and if they happen to engage in activities during their travels, well, Earth has no control over private citizens' behavior outside human space. That's sophistry. That's plausible deniability, my lord." Davrin set down the report. "Lady Saris needs to know about this. Come with me." Lady Saris Melani sat in what had been her family's estate for 30 generations and was now the de facto capital of the winning side of the war. She was younger than Kira had expected, barely 50, but she carried herself with absolute authority. She listened to Kira's presentation without interruption. When it was finished, she turned to Davrin. "Your assessment. Officer Ostan's analysis is sound. The correlation is too strong to be coincidence. And if we're right, if Earth has been conducting a covert assassination campaign in our space, then they've done us a considerable favor," Davrin said quietly. "Every target eliminated was someone who would have fought to the bitter end, someone who committed atrocities. The war has progressed faster and with fewer civilian casualties because these individuals were removed." Saris drummed her fingers on the arm of her chair. "I want to hear it from them. Arrange a meeting with Ambassador Reeves, somewhere private. Tell him I want answers." The meeting took place on a small station in human-controlled space, 3 jumps from the nearest Andali world. Lady Saris brought Davrin, Kira, and 4 guards. Ambassador Reeves arrived alone. They met in a conference room that was probably used for cargo negotiations most of the time. It smelled faintly of recycled air and industrial lubricant. Saris wasted no time. "We know your people have been interfering in our war, Ambassador. We want to know why." Reeves settled into his chair with the calm of a man who had expected this conversation. "What evidence do you have of interference?" Kira activated a holographic display and walked him through her findings. The timeline of deaths, the locations, the travel records of ex-military personnel, the correlation between human presence and enemy casualties. Reeves studied the data carefully. When Kira finished, he was silent for almost a minute. "Officer Ostan, this is impressive intelligence work. You have a gift for pattern recognition." "Thank you, Ambassador. Now would you care to explain it?" "There's nothing to explain. Earth issued no military orders. We deployed no fleets. We authorized no operations in Andali space. But your people are entitled to travel freely during their personal time, Reeves continued. Human citizens earn leave from their employment. During that leave, they are private citizens, free to go where they please and do as they please as long as they don't violate human law. Saris leaned forward. You expect me to believe this was all coincidence. I expect you to believe that Earth's government maintains complete deniability, Lady Saris, because it's the truth. Davrin spoke up. Ambassador, we're not fools. 23 high-value targets don't all die accidentally in 6 months. I wouldn't know, Lord Davrin. As I said, we don't monitor what our citizens do during their personal leave. It would violate their privacy rights. How many of your soldiers took vacation in our space? Kira asked. Reeves met her eyes. Approximately 40,000 over the past 18 months. The silence that followed was absolute. 40,000, Saris repeated slowly. 40,000 of your Special Forces operatives have been traveling through Andali space. Former operatives in most cases, and not just Special Forces, intelligence officers, combat engineers, tactical analysts, anyone with relevant skills. Relevant to what? That I couldn't say. We don't track where they go. We don't monitor what they do. We can't. It would violate their privacy rights as private citizens. Kira felt her frustration building. You're saying your government had no knowledge of any of this. I'm saying my government issued no orders and kept no records of activities that may or may not have occurred outside our jurisdiction. Reeves paused. We're very careful about maintaining deniability, Officer Ostan. It's become something of a specialty. Sarah studied the human ambassador for a long moment. Why? Even if this was unofficial, even if your people acted on their own, why would they do this? What possible motivation could they have? For the first time, Reeves looked uncomfortable. Lady Saris, do you know what humans do for entertainment? She blinked at the apparent non sequitur. No, what do you mean? We tell stories. Stories about heroes who fight injustice, protect the innocent, punish the guilty. We raise our children on these stories. They shape how we see the universe and our place in it. He stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. When my people saw the reports from your war, the civilian massacres, the refugee attacks, the prisoner executions broadcast for propaganda, they didn't see it as your problem. They saw villains who needed stopping, and many of them have the skills to stop such things. You're telling me they did this because of stories? Kira couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. I'm telling you that humans have a very particular cultural value system. We believe in justice, Officer Ostan. Sometimes to an irrational degree. When we see innocent people suffering and we have the ability to do something about it, he turned back to face them. Well, some of us can't not act. So they just took vacation time and went hunting war criminals, Davrin said slowly, for free, for no reward except, what? A sense of moral satisfaction. I wouldn't know about their motivations, but I can tell you that humans don't need to be paid to fight against what they perceive as evil. Sometimes the harder thing is to stop them from intervening. Sarah stood. This is insane. You're describing a culture of vigilantes with military-grade training who operate beyond any oversight. No, Lady Saris, I'm describing a culture that takes individual moral responsibility very seriously. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, you've just admitted that Earth maintains a shadow force of deniable assets who can be deployed anywhere without authorization or accountability. Reeves met her gaze steadily. We maintain no such force. We have citizens who make their own choices. The distinction matters. Does it? Saris's voice was sharp. Whether you ordered it or simply allowed it, the result is the same. Human operatives have been killing people in sovereign Andali space. People who were committing war crimes, Reeves said quietly. People who were massacring civilians. People who, by any measure of galactic law, deserve to face justice. Justice, Kira said, or execution without trial. I'm not here to defend their actions, Officer Ostan. I'm simply explaining the cultural context. Humans have a saying, all that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Many of my people take that very seriously. The room fell silent again. Finally, Sarah spoke. I could expose this, take this evidence to the Galactic Council, demand sanctions against Earth for violating neutrality. You could, Reeves agreed. But then you'd have to explain how you obtained evidence of human citizens' travel records through illegal hacking of our databases, and you'd have to prove that any crimes were actually committed, which would be difficult given that all available evidence points to accidents and internal conflicts. You've thought this through. Always think things through, Lady Saris. It's another human trait. Saris walked to the viewport and stared out at the darkness for a long time. Kira watched her, trying to read her leader's thoughts. Finally, Saris turned back. The war is nearly over. I've consolidated most of the Empire. House Korven is fragmenting. The free captains are scattered. Congratulations, Reeves said, and he sounded sincere. I want it to stop. No more vacations in Andali space. No more convenient accidents. You arrange that. Now that there's a legitimate government again, I suspect our people will have no reason to visit. They were only interested in the lawless elements. That's not a promise. No, Reeves admitted, but it's the best I can offer. I can't control what private citizens do in their free time. Sarah studied him for another long moment. Then she nodded. I'm going to keep this quiet. If it becomes public, other species will fear humanity, and fear makes people do stupid things. We agree, that's why we maintain deniability. But understand this, Ambassador, I'm keeping detailed records of this conversation. If anything like this happens again anywhere in the galaxy, I will expose everything. That seems fair, Saris gestured to Kira and Davrin. We're done here. As they were leaving, Kira paused at the door. Ambassador, yes, Officer Ostan. Those 40,000 humans, are they still out there, still on vacation? Reeves smiled slightly. I believe most of them have returned home by now. I hear the weather on Earth is lovely this time of year. 6 months later, the succession wars officially ended. Empress Saris II stood before the Galactic Council and announced the reunification of the Andali Empire. There were celebrations throughout the galaxy. Trade routes reopened. Refugees began returning home. Ambassador Reeves offered humanity's congratulations and looked forward to continuing peaceful relations. No one mentioned the pattern of convenient deaths that had shaped the war's outcome. But in the classified briefings of intelligence agencies across the galaxy, new protocols were quietly implemented. Avoid excessive civilian casualties. Maintain rules of engagement. Treat prisoners humanely. Not because of laws or treaties, not because of moral evolution, but because somewhere a human on vacation might be watching. In the weeks following the war's end, Kira found herself attending a very private gathering. It was held in a secure room on Station Unity, and it included intelligence chiefs from a dozen different species. The meeting was entirely off the record. A Therian intelligence director clicked her mandibles. So let me make sure I understand the situation. Humanity has approximately 40,000 former Special Forces operatives who will travel anywhere and eliminate anyone they deem deserving. For free, Azelkin nodded slowly, and their government claims to have no control over them during leave time. That's the generous interpretation, Kira said. The frightening one is that Earth knows exactly what happens and designed their system to allow it, plausible deniability as a weapon. Can we prove any of this? The Therian asked. No, Kira admitted. Every piece of evidence is circumstantial. Every death has an alternate explanation. That's the point, said the Zelkin. They've created a system where they can act without consequences because they can always claim ignorance. The Therian was quiet for a moment. What do we do about it? Nothing, said a new voice. They all turned to see a Vraxian admiral entering the room. We do absolutely nothing. Explain, the Therian demanded. Because they eliminated targets we couldn't touch. War criminals operating in sovereign space where we had no jurisdiction. They did the dirty work that all of us were thinking about but couldn't justify politically. The admiral sat down heavily, and they did it in a way that allows everyone to pretend it never happened. So we just accept this, Kira asked. We accept that humanity has capabilities we didn't fully understand, and we adjust our behavior accordingly. You mean we let them terrorize us into better behavior? I mean we acknowledge that there are consequences for atrocities, even if those consequences come from unexpected directions. The admiral looked around the room. The galaxy is more peaceful now than it was a year ago, not because we're more enlightened, because monsters have started checking under their beds for humans. Back on Earth, in the subterranean chambers that officially didn't exist, Ambassador Reeves delivered his report to the Human Defense Council. Did she believe the cover story? Asked Council Member Akafer, a woman whose age was impossible to determine. Which part? The part where we don't track our soldiers on leave, or the part where they acted without orders? Akafer smiled slightly. Both are technically true, which is what makes them effective. She believed what she needed to believe. More importantly, the operation has been shut down. Everyone's back. And the objective? Asked another council member. Achieved. The worst actors were eliminated. The war ended 6 months faster than projections suggested. Civilian casualties in the final months were down 40% compared to the first half of the war. And humanity's reputation? Intact. We're still seen as peaceful, neutral, uninterested in galactic politics. Perfect, Akafer said. She stood and walked to a display showing the current state of the galaxy. Let them keep thinking that. The moment they realize we're paying attention, that's when we lose our greatest advantage. Reeves frowned. Ma'am, with respect, what we did was necessary and effective and completely deniable. She turned to face him. Marcus, do you know why we really declared neutrality? To maintain moral high ground while allowing operations to proceed. No, we declared neutrality because the moment Earth picks a side in a galactic conflict, we become just another player, just another species pursuing its interests through force. She gestured at the display. But as long as we stay neutral, as long as we appear peaceful and disinterested, we can act when necessary without anyone seeing us as a threat. Until someone figures it out. Someone always figures it out eventually. Officer Ostan is very good at her job, but figuring it out and proving it are different things. And even if they prove it, what then? Sanctions against Earth. They'd have to explain why, which means admitting that we eliminated their war criminals for them. Another council member spoke up. The ambassador has a point, though. If we do this too often, the pattern will become undeniable. Agreed, Akafer said, which is why this was a one-time operation. We acted because the situation was extraordinary and because we had the capability to make a difference. But we won't make it a habit. What if a similar situation arises? Reeves asked. Then we'll evaluate it case by case. But always with the same principles: deniability, effectiveness, and restraint. She looked at each of them in turn. Humanity has enormous capability for violence. We've proven that throughout our history, but our greatest strength isn't our weapons or our soldiers. It's our ability to choose when to act and when to show restraint. And when we do act, to make sure no one can prove it, Reeves said dryly. Exactly, Akafer smiled. Welcome to the art of modern warfare, Ambassador, where the greatest victories are the ones no one knows you won. In the months and years that followed, the galaxy settled into an uneasy peace. The Andali Empire rebuilt under Empress Saris II's steady leadership. Trade flourished. Minor conflicts arose and were resolved through diplomacy. And throughout it all, humanity maintained its position as the galaxy's most peaceful species. Earth sent no fleets to threaten neighbors. Human merchants traded fairly. Human diplomats advocated for peaceful resolution to conflicts. But in classified briefings, in secure intelligence facilities, in the private councils of galactic powers, a new understanding emerged. Humanity was watching. Humanity was always watching. And if you crossed certain lines, if you massacred civilians, if you committed atrocities, if you became the kind of monster that humanity believed deserved punishment, you might want to look over your shoulder. Because somewhere, a human might be on vacation, and they might decide that you're exactly the kind of problem they know how to solve. The galaxy didn't become more peaceful because its people became more enlightened. It became more peaceful because evil had learned to fear the consequences of its actions, even if those consequences came from a species that officially never involved itself in galactic affairs. Especially then.